On behalf of all assembled here today, I should now like to invite our newest alumna, Dr. Cindy Blackstock, to address Convocation.
What a great honor to join you, graduates, on one of the most important days of your lives. And thank you to your families, to your friends, both past and those who join you in spirit, and those who are with you today, for inviting me to join you on this most special day. It's a day when opportunities are birthed, when dreams are confirmed, and when we all feel the world's best interests are within our hands. I join with the President in acknowledging the Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lenni Lenape people whose footprints have passed upon these lands for thousands of years. The country needs you. You are the great teachers of generations of children. You are the journalists who will tell us the stories that we may not want to hear, but we must know from. You are the knowledge keepers and the thinkers of a new generation. And many of you will become the parents of a new generation. I'm grateful to each one of you and to your loving families. I can see the love in all of the families that are with you today. The flowers they carry for you, the hugs they give you, the thousands of pictures they're going to take of you today. You know, the world is a complicated and trying place. We see too many examples of intolerance. With the tragedy in Orlando, the unacceptable persecution of Muslim Canadians, such as the woman in London, Ontario recently, and the ongoing discrimination against First Nations children, and many others. But what we know from days like this is that love is more powerful than hate, that light is more powerful than darkness, and knowledge is far more powerful than ignorance. And we must, and we can, with all the strength and love that's in this room, defeat intolerance and rise up to become the examples of the next generation of children that we all hoped we could be. A world full of love, a world full of peace, and a world where difference, brought together in a single light, makes the world's dreams a possibility. One of my heroes, Justice Murray Sinclair, said, and of course he's the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, he said, "The truth will set you free, but sometimes it will piss you off." He also said that one of the most important questions for each person in all of our lives, regardless of our difference and our cultures, is who am I? And what is my purpose in life? Days like this give you a glimpse into it. You spent the last 5 years preparing for this moment to make a contribution in the world. But in my experience, destiny is not always in our hands, and life often has for us a challenge that is bigger than ourselves, one that we will never feel fully prepared to accept, one that we're scared of, one that we think we could never ever possibly achieve. And yet it's in those scary moments, graduates, that we become our whole selves, that we realize that potential of what we were born to do. When I look back at when I got my undergraduate degree in UBC, I was A, relieved, B, looking forward to getting a job and paying off my student loans, and C, I never would have had an idea that the world had planned for me to address the inequalities that have hampered generations of First Nations children in the company of so many other people. Even at this moment, as I stand here, I feel scared of that responsibility. And yet we must all together embrace it with all of our hearts. But in those moments of fear, I've always looked up to the heroes among us. And on days like this, where the skies are blue, I really believe that your ancestors and mine are joined together here celebrating each and every one of you, because you are what they dreamed what would happen. And one of those ancestors for me is a young little girl who loved blue flowers and collecting seashells. Her name is Shannon Kustachin. She was 13 years old when she went to the House of Commons and demanded that First Nations children get safe and comfy schools and equitable education. But her story began before that. As a beautiful little 5-year-old in Attawapiskat First Nation, fluent in Cree and fluent in English, she was one of those kids, probably like most of you, who were so excited to go to the first day of kindergarten, you sharpened your pencil crayons 5 times, just to make sure they worked. But the only school in her community closed that year because it sat atop a toxic waste dump, contaminated by over 30,000 gallons of diesel fuel. The government of Canada brought up portable trailers and put them on the playground of that contaminated site. And it was there, just a stone's throw away from the contamination, that this beautiful 5-year-old and the rest of her friends spent her first day in kindergarten. The government of Canada, one of the richest countries in the world, told the children it would just be temporary. But by the time Shannon was in grade 8, the trailers were still there. They had become so run down that the heat would go off, that ice would build up on the inside, and that rats were infesting the trailers. 3 ministers of Indian Affairs had promised the children a new school and failed to deliver. So what did Shannon do? Shannon believed in the hope and love of each one of you, and more specifically, in the hope and love and commitment to fairness that Canadian children have. You see, I don't know if you feel like I do. I spend a lot of time with kids, I think because they often make more sense than the rest of us do, but also because they are experts in love and fairness. And Shannon believed that too. She thought if she could only show the children how bad things were, maybe they could write to the government and maybe the government would listen to them. So she did this YouTube video and she launched it onto the YouTube and she wondered if any other children would ever watch it. And one of those children who watched it was a little girl in Toronto. And she could not believe that her school that raises funds for kids in Africa had not learned that children in her own country were being denied a proper education. As Shannon said, how are you supposed to grow up and be someone important if you don't have an education? And so Clara got out her pencil and her paper, and she wrote a letter to the Prime Minister. She said, these are all the things I'm doing in school today because I want to grow up and be someone important, and I think First Nations kids should be able to do. Now, she wasn't sure if the Prime Minister would have time to write back, but sure enough, a few weeks later, a very expensive piece of stationery arrived in the post box. The gold seal we all pay for. And inside, she rips open the envelope. It's a big envelope, not a small one. Inside is a 4x6 autographed glossy of the Prime Minister. Now, Shannon looked for the letter, and it said, we'd like to hear from young people. But it didn't answer her question. So this little girl thought the only thing to do was to take the picture to show and tell and talk to the other kids in her school. And so the children were just horrified when they saw Shannon's video. They knew they had to do something to help, and they couldn't believe that the Prime Minister just sent a picture of himself. But that picture inspired creativity. You see, when children hear about injustice, they don't strike a committee. They do something to help. So they quickly brainstorm and they realize that they should all line up in front of their blackboard. They would take a picture of themselves, they would all autograph it, and they would send it back to the Prime Minister and say, answer her question, right? Andrew Kustach, Shannon's father, said, great leaders don't create followers, they create other leaders. And Shannon certainly did that, as tens of thousands of children filled up the Prime Minister's mailbox with letters with crayon and glitter and pencil crayon that said, we want to grow up in a country that is good and great as you believe it is. Tragically for Shannon, at the age of 13, she had to move off reserve to go to a school. There was a high school in her community, but she couldn't become the human rights lawyer that she wanted to be on that underfunded education. And it was shortly after that, for the first time in her life, that she stands in a hallway of a proper school. And she walks into a classroom, and this was a rundown high school, not a glossy high school. But she sees all the things that other children have to learn, and tears start rolling down her face. And when she's asked what's wrong, she says, I wish I had my life to live over again so I could go to a school as nice as this. It wasn't long after that, on a dark highway on her way to school, the school she would have never attended had the one been properly funded in her own community, that we lost this great hero. One of the 45 children in the world to be nominated for the Nobel Prize for Children. But the children she inspired knew that dreams are greater than one lifetime. And within 24 hours, they created a website called Shannon's Dream. They pledged to continue her work. And to this very day, the Prime Minister's mailbox continues to fill up with letters, because all Canadian children have joined with First Nations children to ensure that every child gets a comfy school and a proper education. Now, reconciliation must mean, at its essence, not saying sorry twice. It must mean that we provide every child, like Shannon, an equal opportunity to become one of you. But it will take courage, because sadly, a lot of Canadians have grown up not knowing about these inequalities and too often judging Canadian First Nations children as if they get more. But you're the generation of teachers and journalists and educators that can change that. You can inform Canadians, and in doing so, give us all the skills to do what Shannon wanted us to do. To co-create a Canada where First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children never have to recover from their childhoods again, and one where non-Aboriginal children never have to grow up to say they're sorry. I know you're going to do it. And when you do, when you find that courage in those uncomfortable moments to teach what must be heard, to tell the stories that might piss people off, as Justice Sinclair said, I know there's going to be a little girl up there who loved blue flowers and seashells, and she'll be smiling on you and giving thanks, because you are the leaders of this generation. You are the leaders that can make Shannon's dream come true. And I have a wish for Canada's 150th birthday. Let it be a birthday that we celebrate all together, free of the racial discrimination of a past, and one where every child is worth the money. Thank you very much, graduates. Congratulations to all of you.